As you heard, I'm David Philp, and my day job is at AECOM, where I'm Director for Digital Consulting, Strategy and Innovation. But I think more importantly, in the context of days, I'm probably a long-term user of before it was BCDE, back in the Business Collaborator days, for probably some 18 years now, when I used to be a main contractor. So it's been great. I've been on a journey with Business Collaborator, helping and supporting, and to where it is today. So really delighted to actually take, through the story that we've been on. And I don't think it's an AECOM story. It's more one of our client stories. We've been helping our client, National Health Service Scotland, in their journey from building information to a much more mature model of what we call the digital estate. So the next 20 odd minutes, I'm going to be taking you through the journey that we've gone together, both with our client, NHS Scotland, Health Facility Scotland, and indeed the Business Collaborator team as well. But actually, before I wanted to start the journey, I wanted to actually frame something. I think this is a really important model. It came out the other week, and you may have seen it. It's a Transforming Infrastructure Performance Roadmap to 2030, so in the UK, our central government. And they've developed a model about the built environment, as you can see. Now, have a look across the top. One of the big things is starting to think about how we use our technologies, information management, in terms of outcomes. How do we think about better societal outcomes? And I think this is really important when we talk about our client journey, thinking about their key priorities, how we then think it ties into policy. It might be asset management policy, it might be in terms of clinical policy, but then you can see in terms of how we're starting to think about make smarter decisions, and decisions that are there from data insights. And you can see even government is starting to think about that world of digital twins, that we're all on, and how our technologies play an important part within there. But actually, for me, if you see the next one, you'll have a look through that report. It is fantastic, but you'll see it also puts a highlight, or they call it a focused area, on optimization of the performance of our existing built environment. And this is what I'm talking about with our NHS in Scotland. So please, I would ask you to have a look with that one. So if you think about it, we often think about our new capital investments, but actually, digitization of our retained estate is probably about 99% plus of our built environment. So it's essential that we can put that focus on there, think about digitization, but also the need to connect systems and databases to make better decisions, and indeed better resilience in our built environment as well. And I think when we start to think about this in terms of digitization of our existing asset, it's also, I think, the foundation for digital twins. And it makes us start to think about more and more, when we think about a systems of systems approach, about interoperability and how we can actually share information across domains as well, which is hugely important for our client, and start to think about the importance of information management frameworks, ontologies that are going to help us in terms of that journey. So if you haven't, please have a look. It's a fantastic report, and it kind of sets the scene for what we're going to be talking about today. We're really lucky at AECOM. We've been working with National Health Service Scotland and Health Facility Scotland now for probably about eight years plus within there. And, NHS Scotland are one of the largest asset owners in the UK. And I think the big thing, as Scotland moves towards an ever-increasing digital built environment, driven by policy and client journey plans, building information is seen as a key part of the Scottish construction into the future. And I think as NHS Scotland is one of the largest asset owners in the UK, and if you think about it, over 2,000 assets, if you like, built assets from acute hospitals, one up the road from me, to doctor surgeries, that are either under operation and management, or what's going on maybe with relation in terms of backlog maintenance. So when they're thinking about digitization, it's not about one capital project, it's across a whole asset management ecosystem in terms of what that looks like. And you can see there, we have, in Scotland, we have 14 regional health boards within there, 7 special boards within there, all under the umbrella, if you like, of a National Health Service in Scotland. So if you think about that, that's a colossal amount of physical assets, but also a colossal amount of data and information that need to be available for NHS estates, as well as broader management teams and trust. And again, a lot of this data was kind of living in silos. So you can see the need to start thinking about centralization and digitization, and actually making searching for data pretty much moving from a manual, time-consuming process to something that's automated and digital. So you can see the sort of size of the scale of the change program we're working with, and the client and their board. But I think, like anything, always start with the why. And again, National Health Service Scotland has put a huge emphasis on enterprise information management. And we think about BCDE, I think that's what's really at the heart of it. That not just about projects, but being able to wrap up and put an emphasis on that enterprise level. Think about ISO 55000, how it can support all your asset management strategy, as well as information projects as well. And you can see the why. I think we've all seen the tragedies. We've seen the Grenfell fire, but also for us closer to home in Scotland, whilst no one was injured, the falling masonry at Oxgangs Primary School in Edinburgh. You can see there the wall collapsed. Well, what did that mean? It meant there was nobody could find information digitally. So there's a lot of physical surveys, not just in terms of educational estate, but across all public sector, which meant a huge amount of time was taken out from people's day jobs, trying to find out the information to make smart decisions. So you can see there all these intrusive surveys that were undertaking, which regarded to ultimately to wall ties. But think about the time, what that meant in business disruption, cost in terms of essential services within there. So for NHS Scotland and NHS Scotland Assure, a huge emphasis in terms of purpose in having centralised indexed data right across their entire estate. So if you have one of these trigger events, that information is going to be there. So think about resilience. So one of the key things was a move. You can imagine at that point in time, NHS Scotland was already in a journey in terms of building information modelling, but now thinking we're going back the way in digitising all the existing estate. So moving from just capital delivery to a much more mature model. So a new vector, and we had this concept we work on. There's a working group round about it that sits across all the boards and also specialist functions, the Digital Estate Working Group. So what is it? Well, at the heart, you could say it's a digital twin of all of NHS Scotland's asset, a digital model that mirrors what's there. But one of the key things is the word appropriate. Appropriate data and information that is going to help, if you like, be able to answer the questions or insights relating to that particular asset. Now, that's for a mixture. When we think about digital twinning, that could be in the context of existing 3D models. It might be parametric, it might not, CAD, digitized paper, but lots of sources of linked digital information. And one of the key things at the outset was how can we better use metadata, structured information, common naming, classifications, at the heart of it to make information easier to search, retrieve, and also to make sense of as well. So one of the things within the NHS digital estate is actually putting different levels of sophistication in terms of digital twinning that are always going to be appropriate, from defining principles and temporal scales that might be historic, it might be real time for a new acute hospital there, but we created making sure that it was always proportionate and appropriate levels of digitisation of these assets. So not one level of digital twinning, but different levels that respond to the risk and complexity. So I think this is the key goal right from the very outside. And I should also hasten to add the image on the left is not from National Health Service Scotland, but a typical example that we often see when you go into state teams' offices. You know, how do you turn all that, potpourri of information from paper, O&M manuals to CDs, DVDs that are probably broken, into information that is in a common data environment, that is digital, it's indexed, and can be easily retrieved. So, well, we call it AIMS. Everybody needs a good acronym for the CDE, doesn't it? So in terms of that asset information modelling system within there, and you can see some of the key drivers in Scotland. It's actually a part of, if you like, our Scottish Government's policy note, our BIM policy in there, being able to have good management and retrieval of operational data. It ties into NHS Scotland's ISO 55000 asset management systems within there, but also to actually help in terms of reduce building failure, build that resilience, again, within there as well. But also the big thing is proving efficiency. Not, again, efficiency in capital delivery, but right through the whole asset life cycle, better investment planning, better forward planning, and better structured feedback loops as well. But also from a behavioural side that, good information management and collaborative systems will save time and it will save money and it will build in resilience. And also it's part of that longer term journey plan to embrace future technology and make sure that a robust information platform is at the heart of it. One of the things we've done, and again, I would suggest if anybody was doing it, to try and win hearts and minds, we had a hypothesis that, this having an asset information management CD was going to improve better, if you like, decisions within there. And one of the things that we undertook right at the very beginning was a proof of concept. And that proof of concept had a series of key tests within there. You can see some of the things that we wanted to test within there: the ability to transfer information, to undertake audit trail of documents in terms of storage, ease of access. But we also wanted to check functionality, especially with older systems in terms of CAD, and start to think about the ability to link and integrate with other NHS systems in terms of asset management, but also how we can create a key line of sight between all that data and the different personas and users as well. So thinking about a hypothesis to test, having clear tests, and going for an early proof of concepts. Not just testing, if like, the functionality, but was it going to align with business critical success factors as well? I'm not going to take this one through in any detail, but you can see one of the things, I think it was hugely worth doing, was overlaying the business benefits, again, back to critical success factors. How did the CDE support the business objectives and priorities in terms of person-centred care, safety, quality of care, health of the population? So again, back to making sure we had a line of sight between information, common data environment, but right up to key NHS objectives for the future of their estate, and indeed patient-centred care as well, right at the heart of it. We also mentioned, goodness, 2,000 plus, sites, buildings, blocks within there. We had to work out a way to get all this into, once we're going through the procurement stages, how do we start to proportionately take all this information in a managed and structured way? And one of the things we built, I don't know how well you can see it, was to build a triage process to allow the boards to look at their own estate and look in terms of the complexity of their assets and indeed the risk profile of their assets, which ones we should take in first. It might be in terms of condition, it might be in the functionality of their assets, but it let them do a complexity comparison and start to think of a proportionate way of bringing information across. And I think that's huge. It's not just about the technology of building the processes, the workflows that are going to allow that proportionality of the end users. You can imagine there, 20 odd boards, bringing information across in a managed and structured manner. One of the big things about BCDE as well was the fact that it did have ISO 19650 built in. In fact, looking back, some of the key goals going for procurement were both in terms of security, mindful security, but also the ability to deliver ISO 19650. And as well as the technology, the workflows within the CD, we've had parallel, and this is where we think BC and AECOM have worked well in terms of us building the workflows, the templates, the tools. And you can see some of this work we've done with the client and their boards to try and create harmonized organizational information requirements, AIRs, PIRs, and exchange information requirements. And having this consistency of information standards is equally, as for us, as important as having a consistent technology. And you can see there, one of the structures, again, this is an information exchange into the CDE for our operation and maintenance manuals. And you can see within there, all aligned with data structure, classification within there as well. So equally as important with the technologies, we're building the workflows, the data structures, and the templates. But also doing it, one of the things I'd probably keep back is this word proportionality. And you look at standards such as ISO 19650, it uses the term shall consider. And one of the things we did is build a toolkit that helps boards look at different levels in terms of complexity of sites and projects. Is it low, medium, or high? And be able to apply those same standards to something that's actually going to meet the priority and profile of those projects. But at the same time, you think about the complexity of the ecosystem. It's not just about putting in an AIMS, an AIMS CD, but actually how does it fit with the supply chain? We use this term, the principal supply chain partners, contractors, the lead designers, and their project information models and their technology stack as well. And that was key. There was a lot of working with industry to make sure we can make that happen as well. So one of the things we do is to say on a very small project where we might not have had a PIM CD, a project information model technology, because financially we couldn't afford it. Great, we've now got the technology via BCDE. But on typical projects that are maybe larger under existing frameworks, the supply chain still does provide their CDE in terms of work in progress and shared content within there. And we start to progressively build it in to our aims using suitability codes. So start to think about how these two systems can work together. And again, this is where we're starting to look at the future of BCD with the synchronization and linkage between these ecosystems is hugely important. So making sure that the supply chain, especially for frameworks, can still use their own technologies, and how we can create an integrated ecosystem has been hugely important with us. And again, working well with our clients and the supply chain as well. But that engagement has been hugely important within there. So you can see a typical project on the far left. You may be starting off a capital project. You can see in the sort of magenta box within the aims, we'll have all the reference information. It might be surveys, it might be condition surveys. We've also got our business cases within there. We've then gone into the sort of amber, where we now probably have a mixture of PIM CDs within the supply chain. But as information is going through the suitability code, it's returning back into the AIM-CD. But once we've passed the point of handover, you can see within there we've got all the board's documentation, their alphanumeric information and geometric information within their consistent access and retrieval. So if there's a trigger event, now that could be a failure, it could be a Freedom of Information Act, we can now start to think about retrieval of information in a systematic and computer readable way, which is so important with us. So that model, based upon ISO 19650 Part 3, has been hugely important in terms of creating, if you like, the framework for the AIMS architecture. Again, just an overlay of the same thing you can see within there. One of the big parts is involving, we often think about a CD in the context of capital delivery, but one of the big things with NHS Scotland and Health Facilities Scotland is how we better use the CD in the context of business case stages and concept designs, having consistent stage containers and handover information, but also how it's going to link, if you like, the containers in operation with statutory compliance information, consistent O&M manuals, consistent survey, CAD layouts, especially around about statutory, and indeed increasingly the parametric models that are coming through as well. So I think a simple elegance in terms of what this looks like, and building, if you like, all these key ownerships within there as well. But it also has to be built into, if you like, an asset structure. You can see within there, having consistency is hugely important. And NHS Scotland, or National Services Scotland, actually have a very mature asset breakdown structure. You can see how it comes down right from a board level, down to an individual site, to a block, a floor, and a room. And you can see with there how that links across to all the different asset management systems within there and different types of asset and information structure. You'll see it increasingly this term EAMS, so on the databases, which is the enterprise asset management. That's the asset register data. And one of the big parts for us is about how we now link the BCDE, or our AIMS, to this environment as well becomes hugely important within there. Being able to pull data between the two systems to answer plain language questions is hugely important. And you can see we're on a journey in terms of integration. And I think, again, back to procurement and back to the functional specification and indeed the value architecture for the AIMS, one of the big things was to be able to pull in all our wider information within there. You can see some of the linkages within there as well. We're lucky enough in terms of NHS Scotland does have a centralised or enterprise level estate and asset management system, that EAMS, which is all the property details, the leases, also has their key risk information within there. So one system across all the boards. However, it's a bit more challenging when it comes down to the CAFM systems, the computer-aided facilities management. Different systems down to meet local board levels within there. And we're now getting to that point where we're now looking at the transfer of information and integration between these systems. Different ways of doing it for REST APIs, but we're now working on what that looks like, as well as we mentioned. And again, you'll see, I'm sure, in the presentations later today, how we can think about synchronization and exchanges with other supply chain PIM CDs as well within there. But we're also starting to think more and more, not just about, if you like, the world of capital planning. We talked about, how we're actually trying to improve, if you like, lots of, in terms of better healthcare outcomes as well. And hopefully one of the things you do see there, I think is hugely important, infection control data. How does our physical and digital estate link as well to healthcare informatics and healthcare data as well? So we're thinking about not just improving, if you like, asset management, capital delivery, but by linking inter-CD environments, infection control data, and other clinical and healthcare informatics, we can start to think about changing the relationship dynamic to improving, if you like, better societal outcomes right to the very beginning of that model within there as well. It's hugely important. So what are the big changes that we're seeing? Okay, we're putting new technology in. We spent a lot of time at the beginning looking at different personas. What was this going to mean for someone that worked in, say, estates management, capital delivery, or indeed in terms of one of the clinical functions? So there's a lot of time spent in terms of discovery at the very beginning, looking at their critical success factors, their value architecture, the benefits. But some of the practical big changes that we've seen is around about new information standards. We think the success, if you like, of the aims is going to be not just in terms of does the technology stand up, but making sure that we can apply equally right through the whole of NHS estate and also the supply chain consistent information standards based upon ISO 19650 and additional requirements of Health Facilities Scotland and their boards. You can see some of the key things we think have been hugely important. We'll touch upon our container hierarchy. You know, we've got lots of legacy information that we still need to use containers for. We will move more and more into metadata, consistent naming, the metadata itself consistent with ISO 19650, the importance of status codes to move from the PIM to the AIM environments, and the last exchange, especially in terms of legacy projects as they move across into the world. So one of the things we have done, again, to try and set up, because imagine we are dealing with lots of legacy information that's coming across from different environments, is initially to create up, if you like, consistent information container hierarchy across all stages, from the early initial agreements and business cases into construction, but also into handover and operation. And again, this is really important for us during these early stages of moving from legacy environments to new environments as well within there. I think one of the big things we're seeing is the importance of naming conventions and that harmonisation across the different boards within there as well. Rob, I'm seeing your slides not updating for me, I'm guessing. Hopefully that's not for everyone else. I don't know if some of I can just come in there just to double check within there. But you can see one of the things that we have tried to do is as much as practical, using the ISO 19650 in the National Annex as a framework to try and build a consistent approach across all of our boards within there. Again, trying to do that, it's taken time, it's taken effort. You can imagine all the boards use their own existing ones within there. And some of the key things for us that are hugely important, I think whatever you're seeing the slides within there, came down to making sure we're consistent in terms of the functional and spatial breakdowns. Different boards, different sites have different ways of doing it. So trying to create simple drop-down menus that we're going to allow boards to look at these, especially in the context of functional, within there, hugely important as well. So I think maybe focus on different slides within there, but hopefully everybody's getting it. But huge importance in naming conventions and ISO 19650 in the National Annex, hugely important as a framework. And I think it's important to say as a framework. There were certain fields we had to adapt that we're going to meet in terms of that harmonisation within there as well. Metadata, hugely important. Obviously, we are using the guidelines of ISO 19650 with what we're calling you shall in terms of status, revision and classification. Classification, hugely important as well within there. But also for us, especially in terms of legacy data, is that asset hierarchy, being able to put the name of the boards. We use in Scotland the Scottish Construction Investment Manual, what stage is it at, and also thinking about optional metadata for getting down to, if you like, room levels. Indeed, information classification as well, around about security, hugely important within there as well. So huge importance on the information standard, the naming convention, which harmonises, and again, the amount of effort that's required to do that, don't underestimate it. Getting this consistent is hugely important as well. Suitability codes, we want information to move right the way through gradually as it goes through a process. And one of the big things about BCDE is the fact we've got ISO 19650 workflows that are built into there. So if you can see with us, once we start to move in through our authorization codes, accepting and moving information in seamlessly. So we're not waiting to the handover of a project as a whole, but moving information across within there. Huge importance of metadata in the last exchange as well. You can imagine in terms of timing, lots of projects that I started during the maybe halfway through our procurement of the CD. So we want to make sure the last exchange can start to get information across from projects within there. And one of the things within there you can see is we're trying to make sure you can see the example document naming within there, how we move to maximize use of metadata. You can see the short code at the project level with it, if you like, starting a project with the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 and the name of the site. But we're also now putting these XXX and using metadata to actually solve this during the operational stage as well. Classification, hugely important. We've been using Uniclass, and I think you can see some of the benefits of it within there as well. We can start to use code counts. This is something we increasingly use to try and move across in terms of what that looks like as well. So, and we're working again with the likes of NBS to try and update for any Uniclass codes that are maybe for healthcare that are maybe not within the current system at this moment in time. So what does this all look like? This is just, we don't have time or the facility to show that, but this is some from our proof of concepts at the early stage. And I will say the proof of concept was hugely valuable, winning hearts and minds, being able to fine-tune user needs within there. So, but you can see at this moment in time, the single pane of glass sitting across the whole of the NHS estate within there. And we can start to drill it down. You can start to now see where we've got the overview across all of our health boards. You can start to see our 14 regional boards appearing and some of our special boards as well. We can now start to think about filtering by the different board levels and their geographical sites within there. And we can now drill down into a particular board with this. In this case, we're coming down into one of our regional boards, Greater Glasgow and Clyde. You can start to see we're coming down into back to that data hierarchy, down into Glasgow Royal Infirmary within there. You can start to see some of the information and the data appearing on the right-hand side within there. And let's come down a level. We'll go down from a site level, down the hierarchy, to now what we call blocks. And you can see appearing within there all the blocks in terms of what that looks like. We're now going to start to drill down into, we call them portlets, down for that site level as well, which are hugely important, where we now have our asset dashboard of all our asset information and our quick links, which are hugely important once we get down to that board level. Where now we can start to see within there, we've got a nice clear sort of pane that shows all the different blocks within that site, so someone can find out that's maybe looking at something. It might be in terms of the Jubilee block and the wards within there. You can see within there, we're now coming down that hierarchy, we're coming down to our surgical blocks, and you can see some of the wards that are within there. We've worked very hard, and this is where it comes back to back with our container hierarchy to make sure we get information structured in a way that's going to work for the team. And so one of the things we said, hugely important, working with the different personas to make sure we get the information in a way that's going to help them, in a way they'll use. So you can see the sort of breakdown from cleaning and maintenance, the asset, that's built information, all the key certifications, statutory compliance, health and safety, and all the surveys within there as well. It's in a structured way. But also one of the big parts as well is, we're trying to work, and you can see the work that Matt Owen's been helping with in terms of trying to help us get all this information across from legacy as well. So we've been doing lots of pilot projects to make sure we can do this consistently and build workflows across as well. It's a nice structured way of pulling all that asset information as well. Big part of the digital estate, though, is looking at different ways that we can start to build, if you like, our geometrical interfaces around about it, that user interface. And this is one of the examples in terms of 360-degree mesh photography that we're starting to pull in as well. And we're exploring what's within the wider Bentley ecosystem to create these context capture meshes within there, these 360-degree walkarounds, which are hugely important for the users as well. And also one of the big things is being able to tie it into an ever-increasing parametric model as well. So lots of tests in terms of that BIM ecosystem as well within there. One of the big things we mentioned at Proof of Concept is we wanted to make sure we can create saved searches within there as well. And this is some of the key searches we want to do by organisation type, information types, status of information, the stages, the roles within there, and indeed the location and level. So again, this is why for us getting the information of the document naming conventions hugely important as we move through within there as well and be able to test that. And one of the things increasingly that's becoming hugely important is our dashboard and the reports in terms of what that looks like. So I think it's fair to say that we are together on a journey. And I think that's one of the big things. This has not been about putting a technology in. It's been a partnership. We've been through discovery. We've been through definition. We've been going through proof of concepts. And we're now at that point where we're moving into that world of working groups and making it happen within there as well. But one of the big things, it's a team effort. But for us, it's been about having a client that has very clear in what they're doing. And that means to understand their critical success factors, but also willing to work with all the supply chain and the partners to make something that's going to be practical, it's going to work, it's going to be secure, but will also not just be about better asset management, but better healthcare and societal outcomes as well. So for us, we've been really lucky to work with both the BCDE team, but also with a fantastic client in their supply chain as well. So thank you for listening to our collective story.